I spent about an hour scraping off the rest of the form. What is it? It's just press board, because I had soaked it for a couple of days, so it got relatively soft. And I did a little damage here, there, and yonder with the chisel, like right here. Very superficial. There was probably a divot in the board, in the form board, which made the fiberglass resin poke out toward me, toward the form. And then when I was scraping with the chisel, I would catch those little bumps. But it looks good. Sanded the top, just 5 minutes with the sander. And it's nice and flat. There are teeny tiny little holes, and there are some imperfections where I did the clay round over, and there are some imperfections between my different, I did fiberglass and then the next day I would tie it in. Well, it's not perfect, but I'm gonna get the Bondo and do a skim coat over everything and sand it up. Should be smooth. I don't want to get too far into it because there may be changes down the road, but I'm at least sand it up, get it bondoed, and maybe get some primer paint on it just to make it look better until I'm ready to make some serious decisions about it.
So before anybody gives me some lip about using Bondo on a boat, it is polyester resin based, the same as the boat's made out of. It has a lot of fillers in it. It doesn't have a lot of strength. I wouldn't use it for structure, and I wouldn't use it under the waterline. But as far as using it to make a flat surface flatter or to make something look better with paint on it, go for it. There's nothing wrong with using Bondo and just for aesthetic reasons on a boat. Now this Bondo is a little old and kind of thick and kind of hard to work with, and then I put too much the catalyst in it, and it just wanted to get hard almost instantly. I used the rest of this container. I bought a new container, and it's much more creamy and easier to work with, and I try hard to get the hardener the right ratio, because it's just crazy how fast this stuff sets.
My first skim coat of Bondo, I mixed too much hardener in it and it got hard before I could do anything with it. My second coat, I didn't put enough hardener in it and it gummed up my sandpaper. So let's see if I got this batch right. I got a couple of issues with this flange. Well, one, I know it's too wide. I made it too wide. I'll probably cut half of this off. But it's kind of bendy. It's just not thick enough. And also, this will be the hinge side. So I'm assuming I'm going to be screwing and attaching a hinge, a piano hinge maybe. So I think what I'm going to do is fill that cavity with wood and thickened resin, make it solid back there. And then after that, I'll probably add more glass to the flange all the way around, just to make it a little beefier. I may put wood back here too to make this solid, just because I don't know what kind of latch I'm going to have and I don't know where it's going to attach, but if I make that whole thing solid, can't go wrong.
Now the wood is glued in and the thickened polyester resin is cured. Now I'm doing the unpleasant task of sanding it smooth and knocking the bumps off.
Okay, so we're looking at the inside of the door jamb, and this space, this concave space, I filled it here and here with a piece of wood, and I set it in place with thickened polyester, because there was plenty of mechanical things for the polyester to grab onto, and that was yesterday. And today I kind of sanded the top of the wood flat, and now I have glued on these pieces of cured fiberglass. This was from the old boat stringers, and I glued them on with epoxy because I was gluing on smooth surfaces and I really need this to stay. So when this cures, I'll stand the door up and I'll trim the door jamb to a final shape, and I'll go back to sanding and doing Bondo on the outside. But we're in the middle of Hurricane Laura. The sun's still shining, but I'm hesitant to go out there and do some polyester on the stringers, which I would rather be doing. So it's the inside day today because of the hurricane. We're okay, we just got a lot of rain. I sanded all the black off, and I've started the fairing process with a little Bondo here, there, and yonder. And I'm going to go ahead and prime the whole thing with some heavy-bodied primer. I know it's not ready for primer. I still have a lot of spots to patch, but it's not pleasant to work with. It's sticky, and it's it's fiberglass, and every time I sand it, those little fibers are exposed, so it's pretty unpleasant right now to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and put a couple of coats of heavy primer, and then hopefully that'll make it, one, I'll be able to see the imperfections better, and two, make it a little more pleasant moving it around. So one coat of this stuff, I painted with a brush. You're supposed to spray it, and a light sanding with 150 grit, and it's just an incredible huge difference. One thing, I can rub my hand on it now without picking up splinters. I can see all the little holes that I need to deal with. So I'm going to be back to Bondo, try to fix all these little boogers, and then after a couple of coats of that, I think I'll actually get my spray gun out and spray the primer, and then call it good for a while, because chances are there's going to be changes made to this thing. I'm not trying to finish painting it now. I was just trying to keep busy while it was raining, but I think the rain stuff is over, so I'll be back outside tomorrow.
You're witnessing a small mini miracle. This paint gun that's been on the shelf for possibly 15 years actually still works. And the paint that was many years old, I was able to mix up, and it still works.
Bringing it out into the daylight has revealed a million little defects, but all of them very small. I'm pretty darn happy with it so far.
Well, I was planning on being back in the boat working on stringers, but one of my rolls of fiberglass is lost somewhere in the trucking world. So it's always good to have several projects going on simultaneously, because it's so easy to get held up missing a piece or a part or supplies. And I like to keep lots of things going. It keeps my mind crazy. I'm cutting the doorway or the door jamb back to final dimensions with the little grinder and the diamond wheel, and I only had one little whoops where I cut a gash out of the part I shouldn't have cut a gash out of. Then some sanding with the belt sander to make the corners, the round corners, prettier, and then I used the random orbital to just ease all the corners, get rid of all the Sharpies. So now it feels good, it looks good, so good stuff.
Okay, so I got the opening trimmed to size. I got the edge sanded where it's nice and smooth, and since I've doubled it, it's super strong. And I cut this inside corner, cut the cove out of it. I made it square so the hinge will fit in there nice and straight. And yesterday I painted the inside with my go-to epoxy paint, and it just showed up how terrible my glass job was. It had all kind of Sharpies and jagged edges. So I got in there with the grinder and did a lot of grinding, and I'll have to put another coat of epoxy. But now, no risk of coming out bloody when you come out of there. I'm really smart when it comes to hindsight, but I tell you, I should have made, I was thinking that this 3/4 of an inch was a lot. I should have made it like 1.5 inches, and that way I could have made a substantial door frame, but it's 3/4. I'm gonna make the door 1 inch thick. I'm going to use the Cusa board around the perimeter because I can paint it without wrapping glass around it, and it'll be weather proof or resistant or whatever, and I'll glass the face of it. So I'm going to glue up a frame with the Cusa board 1 inch thick around the perimeter, and I can put gussets in the corners because it's all going to be hidden with a flat finish. So I got my work cut out for me. So I've got the first 2 corners glued. I'll take the clamps off and see if they stay. And I'm just going to work my way around the perimeter. And I've learned that this stuff is terribly itchy when you run it through the saw. It's just as bad as working with any other fiberglass. So I'm going to need to be more careful about what I'm wearing when I'm using this stuff. I got the rest of the pieces of the puzzle glued together. I'm not 100% confident this is going to work, but we'll give it a shot. It's going to require a lot of sanding, and I'm not looking forward to it because this stuff's not very friendly to your skin pores. So the first glue, well, the second glue from this morning dried, And now I'm gluing, I doubled up this side, that's the latch side. And I think that latch sits 2 inches back from the edge, so I wanted it in Cusa board. And I doubled it up top just because it seemed like a good thing to do. I'm going to cut the center of the door out of this roofing foam. This is the same foam I found unacceptable for possible submerged locations. But if this console door is ever submerged, I got problems other than whether the foam will absorb water or not.
So this is where I'm stepping off into the world of I don't know what I'm doing. I know that I can apply cloth and resin to this paper-backed foam. I did some sample pieces earlier and it actually does quite well. And I know that I'm using laminating resin, which never totally fully cures, or at least for a long time it stays a little bit tacky. And that's a good thing for laminating because you can come back at a later date, a day later, a week later, whatever, and put another layer of cloth and resin, and you're going to get good chemical bond because that surface never totally cures. But so it seems kind of backwards, but if you want it to cure, if you want to be able to sand it, if it's your last coat, the way you get it to cure is to protect it from oxygen, because in an atmosphere where there is oxygen, it doesn't cure. No oxygen, it does cure, which is kind of backwards to most glues and chemicals. But anyway, so I thought that if I covered this with visqueen, this is 6 mil visqueen, that would protect it from oxygen and it would cure. And also if I pressed it against my freshly sanded flat tabletop, I would get a nice flat surface. So my plan was to, do the resin, flip this over, put the wet polyester against the visqueen and smush it flat. Well, 2 things happened. 1, it didn't cure, and I don't know why, but it must have been something to do with reaction to the visqueen. And 2, it looks like the visqueen expanded when it was with the contact with this polyester resin. So my finished product looks a lot like elephant hide, and it was not what I expected. And I got a mess on my hands right now. So it's the next day, and I'm thinking how clever I am. I'm uncovering this thing, and I'm thinking I'm going to have a beautiful, flat, hard, sandable surface. But I was wrong. So if you look closely, you can actually see how the visqueen itself was distorted. So apparently, visqueen and this polyester resin are not compatible. But what is surprising is that the stuff didn't cure. It's terribly sticky. So there's a close-up view, and let's see what we can do, or start over, one or the other. I can always cut the panel out and do it again, although I really don't want to.
So I might be digging myself into a deeper hole, but the way it was, there was no way I was going to be able to sand this flat because it was never fully cured. So I put on 1 coat of resin with some jacked up catalyst, like 2.5%. And it seemed to cure pretty good, and then I went ahead and painted it with my go-to epoxy paint, which seems to cure on anything, and it sands really well. So I'll give this an hour or so and I'll see if I shot myself in the foot or not. But while I had some epoxy mixed up, went ahead and put the 2nd coat on the inside of the console, and it's looking pretty respectable. Now, I don't know whether it was the hot mix of resin I put on top of the uncured resin, or the gray paint, or just waiting 3 or 4 days. But it's cured enough now I can sand it, doesn't come up to paper. So the little door is salvageable. I'm gonna sand it flat. It feels a lot flatter than it looks. We'll get this cleaned up, and I got to make it fit the opening. It's a super cool texture. I hate to sand it all off, but it's not very nautical, not very boat-like, but man, it looks cool. Yesterday I sanded a lot, and then I did a skim coat of epoxy, and it's looking pretty respectable. I'm going to start trying to fit the door to the console. First thing I need to do is cut a notch all along here because the hinge sticks out. If I don't, I'm going to have a big crack here and a big crack here. So I'm going to try to remove some of this material, and I think maybe with the belt sander, see what I can do. I got the notch. I cut most of it with the table saw. And now I'm going to cut my first curve. To get this one fitting well, I'll just work my way around one little side at a time. I'm getting closer to fitting, but my door is 1 inch plus a little bit because of the fiberglass, and the recess is 3/4, so I need to remove 1/4 from the back side. Get some of it with the table saw, but that inside part I'm going to have to get with a router. It'll be a little more trouble. But we're going to reduce it down a little bit.
So I went along the edges with the table saw and just cut a bunch of grooves, and then I'm cleaning out the remaining part with a starting out of a sharp chisel, but it dulls quickly messing with this fiberglass stuff.
Okay, I got the back of the door, and I just coated it with neat epoxy to let some of this paper soak up some epoxy resin. Filled all my little gaps. Tomorrow I'll put some cloth on it. So I got a layer of 6-ounce cloth on the back of the door, and I'm setting it with epoxy, and this stuff takes forever to cure, so this is tomorrow's job to trim it up. And I think I'm going to try to get it attached to the hinge to make it open and close. And I ordered a latch set.
So it's nice and heavy. The quality looks pretty good. Looking forward to trying to put this in. Unfortunately, it doesn't open up quite wide enough. The door is a little over 1 inch. It only opens up a little less than 1 inch. So another problem to deal with.
Okay, for the record, Chinese roller pads, about 25 cents a piece if you buy 60 of them. Home Depot roller pads, they're over $1 a piece. I used these yesterday because I was out of these. These just came in. This fell apart with the epoxy paint, pretty steady. These haven't fallen apart with epoxy or the polyester. So, just my 2 cents on that. Working on the latch for the console door. Basically, you drill a 2-inch hole and put it in there. And this little strike thing here needs to grab the flange that sticks out. You need to grab this flange. There's not a whole lot of room for error. But we got to do it.
The latch took a little bit of tuning, not too much. The hinge took a lot of tuning, and it's still not quite right. But we have a door, and it works, and it latches. I just need to, I meant to fill some of the cracks around the perimeter because they're a little, some of them are big and ugly. But so far so good.